More than 85% of police officers say their work is harder today as a result of high-profile incidents between law enforcement and black citizens. That's according to a survey from the Pew Research Center published Wednesday. The survey drew on the experiences and attitudes of nearly 8,000 policemen and women. Joining me now to discuss the findings is CBS News Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Pegues. All right, so Jeff, what else did the Pew Research survey discover?
Well, there were several eye-opening things, really, if you're looking at law enforcement these days. According to this research and these polls, 7 in 10 officers say that there is a reluctance to stop people. Another three-quarters of officers say that there is a reluctance to use force. 3/4 of officers say that there is increased tension between blacks and police. And so if you are running a police department across the country, you're seeing those numbers. And perhaps you're surprised, but I've talked to a lot of people in law enforcement who say that they aren't surprised by those numbers. In fact, this is a trend that they have been seeing really over the last year or so, maybe even longer than that. Elaine, you'll recall that in 2015, there was this term that was being thrown around at the time, the Ferguson effect. And that was this term that James Comey first used, which referred to the fact that there was this viral video effect. People and police officers were being caught in action on camera, and that was sort of having an effect, not only for people in the community, but also in how officers were responding and handling stops. And so what we see in the results of this poll is really an aggregation of that, because as I've been talking about, there have been a lot of police officials who've seen this happening for some time.
Well, Jeff, give us a sense of the scope of this survey.
Well, based on what I've been hearing, this is something that we've not only heard about in bigger cities, but in smaller towns as well, and wealthier towns as well, in places where you wouldn't expect these things to develop. But it is happening there too. In talking to some police chiefs across the country, there is this, as that survey reported, this reluctance to stop people, because there are a lot of officers these days who feel like they do not want to be put in a situation where they are accused of racism. And so that is what you are seeing in some of these surveys. This aggregate effect of all the video, all the social media coverage, and the protest as well, and it seeps down into the mindset of police officers on the streets.
So, Jeff, is that really what's different here? All of those things that you just mentioned, the video, the social media, because as you've told us on numerous occasions, you've been reporting on these issues between law enforcement and people of color. This is not necessarily new, these tensions.
No, it's not new, but depending on who you talk to, it's what you might expect after this especially turbulent period in law enforcement, the last 3 years or so. But there are a lot of police chiefs in this country who are committed to moving forward with reforms. And so even though the results of that survey were not positive in terms of views of attitudes between community and police, there are some police chiefs who've seen positive signs of repairing relations. In fact, there was a Gallup poll late last year that showed that 76% of people had a great respect for police officers. And so some chiefs have pointed to that poll and see some positive signs in the reforms that are underway.
Well, President-elect Trump branded himself the, quote, law and order candidate, end quote. Do we have any sense of how that's being received now that he's going to be in the White House?
Well, from people in the community, it's not being received in a positive way. In some communities, certainly, communities of color. As far as law enforcement is concerned, I've talked to police organization officials who say that no matter what is done or what is said at the federal level, at the local level, you will still have police chiefs who are moving forward with these reforms. The reforms that I'm talking about, body cameras, more transparency. efforts to reach out to members of the community to bridge that gap. And so there are a lot of people who feel in law enforcement that the reforms are already in motion and they are heading in a direction where there will be this added transparency that includes the body cameras and other efforts to bridge these gaps that have been part of these divides in these communities over the last several years, certainly, but really over decades. So this is an issue that's not just going to shake out of the system in a matter of years. It's going to take time. And there are a lot of people who are committed to the long term in these reform efforts.
We know you'll be watching it. Jeff Pegues in Washington for us. Jeff, thanks so much.